Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on the part of the world you have logged in from. I'm attending this with my colleague from Bangalore, and it's half past 10 in the evening for us. So we hope everyone is doing well and keeping safe. All right, let's dive in. Welcome to the presentation on implementing Adobe Experience Manager as a standalone instance at our company, Mavenir. I am Ravi, and I lead the technical documentation practice at Mavenir. And I have my colleague, Chander Aima, who's a senior writer at my organization. And we will cover this presentation together, and we'll be jointly sharing the details on how we implemented Adobe Experience Manager and moved legacy content into data in a very short time span. Perhaps what we achieved would qualify as one of the quickest implementation of a data solution in a company that was on legacy writing tools, and that was using an internal documentation sharing mechanism, SharePoint, to share documents with the external customers. The SharePoint application that we have internally doubles up as an internal information repository, as well as a tool to share our documents with the external customers. So we overhauled a few things along the way, and we wanted to share this experience with our technical documentation friends. Looking back, what contributed to our success was the fact that we assessed the top customer needs, talked out a plan by having a hard look at our existing documentation styles, the styles that existed within our FrameMaker, our Word, and multiple other documents. And then we explored automation, and then we broke down the project into multiple smaller self-contained projects that expedited our implementation. We'll speak more about that in the coming slides. And of course, we invested in a great tool called Adobe Experience Manager, that helped us immensely. On the first day of the conference, we heard the PwC speakers, the PricewaterhouseCoopers speakers, mention about auditing content, estimating delivery cost, and when we look back at what we did in our organization, Chander and I feel that that's a great starting point for the successful completion of a project. Auditing content stands out, basically knowing what your documents comprise of, the various nuances, what are the drawbacks, what are the pluses in your document. You know the documents inside out as a team, as an organization, the various styles, and where do we want to go next if you are planning to move up the ladder in terms of enhancing the user experience and delivery. I also want to speak a sentence about these Adobe organized meetings like this one that we are attending now. There is an immense wealth of information and knowledge we gain from such wonderful yearly sessions, and we are convinced that the information that gets shared on different topics would be of benefit to some team somewhere. As always, it's always wonderful to be at these sessions. In the next 30 to 40 minutes, the items that we plan to cover on this are on this particular slide. We'll start by speaking about our organization, Mavenir. We will then move on to speak about the team. Why speak about the team? So that the audience gets an idea of the way we were working prior to AEM implementation, and then contrast it with what happened later. We will cover the roadmap that we had and how we accomplished the project implementation. We'll then move on to how we broke the project into manageable chunks of small multiple projects. And that's what we will talk about in that 3 sub-projects bullet that you see on the slide. So let me start by talking a few words about Mavenir. So we were founded in the year 2005, and Mavenir has been in the mobile telephony space for about right now 16 years plus, and we have a huge product portfolio that comprises the products in mobile platforms, Access and Edge, Core, and mobile services. In addition, we offer a bouquet of services in the managed services space, professional services, and in the systems and service integration space. We are known for our huge presence in the 4G area, and we have started to have a good presence in the 5G, RAN, and packet core areas as well. These are the areas that we intend to dominate in the coming years, and we have a substantial amount of documentation for all these multiple verticals. With over 250 customer service providers, Mavenir offers a comprehensive end-to-end portfolio across every single layer of the network infrastructure stack. We have customers in over 120 countries that serve over 50% of the world's subscribers. As said earlier, we thought a slide on the team would be important. Just so that folks can appreciate what was happening before and what changed later. All right. So coming to the technical documentation team, the team that Chander and I are a part of, we have a team of 15 writers that support a very large base of products. Right from the year of inception, we have been on FrameMaker and other Adobe products for developing and delivering content. I would like to spend a minute talking about the legacy way of documentation, the old way of documentation delivery, so that it helps the audience to form a picture of what was prior and what changed, and it could also help them if they are contemplating a move to something as new as Dita. So my organization has over 50 products, big and small. It could be more, plus give or take another 10, 15. And we have multiple deliverables for each of these products. And these are authored in FrameMaker, the latest version we have, FrameMaker 2015. And we package everything into a single package file using Adobe Acrobat Pro. And we then upload this single package file to a customer portal. And what's a customer portal? It's nothing but an on-premise installation of SharePoint, which means that the same documents that we were put internally into our internal repository. By using a different credential mechanism, we expose it to the external customers as well. So the customers would come to these pages that are set up for them. These are SharePoint pages, and they would download each of these individual package files. And upon opening these package files, they would be presented with multiple PDF files that would be a single documentation deliverable, say a user guide or a configuration guide. It would have a package, would have multiple PDF files. And then they would navigate to the doc and the content that they were looking for. So this was the method that we had been following for quite some time, and this was cumbersome. And customers in the recent past had been coming to us saying that they were not happy with the way things were going. And especially so, as Mavenir was going after bigger markets, the demands on the documentation, the quality, the format, the medium in which it was getting delivered also started growing. And rightly so, because we are right now competing with some of the bigger players in the market, the Ciscos, the Ericssons, all the big players out there. The feedback that we got on our docs centered around items such as navigation, ease of use, ease of locating updates, and the presentation styles, etc., and the search mechanism. These were 4 or 5 things that customers were constantly, pinging us about. They wanted to see some radical change in that. So there had been discussions going on in the organization related to this. The biggest grouse from the customers was the packaging bundle model itself. I had mentioned earlier that we used to deliver our documentation in the form of a single package file. So customers had to download the bundles, and when the team published new content, the updates wouldn't reach them until and unless they checked for the new bundle online, went into the SharePoint, logged in with their credentials, and downloaded the packages again, and then they navigated to that individual document. So keeping in view the feedback that we had been receiving from the customers, we decided to move from the static model of delivery, if you will, as this. I'm terming it as static because it required a lot of initiation from the customer to go check for the package file and then pick it up and process it and then get to the right documents. So this required the customers to check for new packages, download, and check for changes. And we wanted to move away from the static model of delivery to a more dynamic model. So the considerations, the priorities that we had in our in the team was that we need to have the ease of reuse, the ease of conversion, and we had to future-proof our development and delivery as one of our primary goals. So these three things, were played on everyone's mind as we sat around the table and discussed, where should we be headed? And the biggest challenge in all these things, when we speak about static delivery versus a more dynamic mode of delivery, so the biggest challenge that we had to encounter was that, all these changes that we were talking about had to be accommodated within the existing SharePoint delivery mechanism. So there could be models where, I can easily move on to a separate, web platform and then have a separate web page delivery mechanism set up. So in our case, all these things had to be accommodated within the SharePoint delivery mechanism. So this was both exciting and challenging. We were sweetly surprised by the capabilities of AEM and how we could harness its full potential with certain tweaks and automation. So the next half of the presentation, which Chander would help us drive and take us through, would be focusing on how we achieved that. So I'm handing it over to Chander. Chander?
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. Okay, so I'll just put a slide where we would what Ravi discussed just now. I'll make a visual representation of that. So what we see on the slide right now on the left side was our pre-AEM setup, if we'll call that. And that's the system that we wanted to replace. So we maintain bulk of our content as FrameMaker source files. And for every product release, we would update this content, generate these PDFs, and then we would use Acrobat to bundle it. Once this activity is done, we'll upload it to SharePoint, and then we would turn on the access control permissions, and our customers would download that. Publishing activity, as expected, was manual and was an overhead. On the other side of the divide, the customers were getting bundled PDF. Change management was difficult because customers were used to accessing offline content. Until they download the package again, they never got the new delta. Then we decided to adopt a new content strategy. Now, what was going to change? What you see on the right is we would author our content in data or XML. We would use AEM or CC as our CCMS as well as our production engine. We would continue to use our existing publishing channel, that is SharePoint. But the thing that was changing here is the platform remained the same, but our presentation of content would be overhauled. So we would make content available as HTML files and downloadable PDFs. Each product would have a product landing page, and this page was getting generated dynamically. That was the ask, and we would use taxonomy and metadata to build these pages in SharePoint. In addition, we were leveraging on the inbuilt functionality, search functionality of SharePoint. The ask was that SharePoint would index these files, but it would also process it based on the metadata that we add to the file. So as Ravi pointed out just now, okay, in the new system, what was happening is the publishing would be automated, and customers would consume this content online. They had access to the latest and the greatest version of the product documentation, and they obviously the navigation and search and accessibility experience was much better. So we were in fact replacing what we see on the left with what we see on the right. It was giving us better control when we were authoring, and it was lifting up our customer experience. So when we embarked on this journey, so this is what our timeline looked like, and which was very scary to look at in the beginning. So we started this discussion of content strategy and roadmap, and we evaluated a few CCMSs before we zeroed on AEM. We broke down the work items into smaller chunks. We also had to zero on an implementation partner who could fulfill our requirements, because we needed content to be migrated into AEM. There was a lot of content that we had that had to be migrated, and we also needed some integration with SharePoint, because we were talking about content and metadata. So all this legwork was done from Jan to May 2020. And we had given, as you see on the slide, we had given ourselves 5 months to execute this implementation. With a kickoff in June, we were aiming at a go-live date in the middle of October. It seemed a very difficult proposition, too many things to accomplish, and a very tight schedule. And if we lined up all the tasks and activities, it seemed very difficult to accomplish. So what we did is we had a hard look at the activities and felt that if we could group some of these tasks together and break them into separate buckets, we might be able to expedite or at the least manage the timelines better. So the subsequent slides that we have, we're going to talk about what these sub-projects were and what did we do in each of these sub-projects that expedited our migration, customization, and our publishing. So our first task was we had a lot of legacy content and it needed to be moved to data. And we had big chunk of content as FM source files, and we were interested in a framework rather than we just outsource this work to some vendor, get the files back, and start all over again. And we were also interested in a framework that would require minimal effort during the conversion process. So that was one sub-project that we identified. The second sub-project that we identified was AEM customization. A big chunk of it was how do we plan to customize our plugins and how do we build our taxonomy. And there were also a few pieces pertaining to initial setup and configuration, setting up the repository, and customizing the web editor. And the last chunk was the publishing. Here we had to enhance the user experience on SharePoint, and we had to build dynamic landing pages. We had to change the user experience. And what made it more complex and challenging was that we were talking about implementing it across two systems. We felt that these sub-projects were self-contained and not interdependent, and we could start work independently. We didn't have to migrate. The reason why we broke it down into three separate projects is that we didn't have to wait for the content to be migrated and then we start the customization. And after customizations are done, we could pick up the publishing piece. We could start on all of these activities from day one. And based on our priorities, we could deprioritize something, keeping in the overall project progress in view. So in fact, from day one, we started working on the publishing piece because we felt we took a long time. And if we would have deferred it towards the end of the project, it would have delayed our implementation by a few months, at least. We'll go a little deep into all these three buckets that we had identified. So for companies that want to move to an XML-based system or a CCMS, the first challenge that everybody faces is how do we migrate our existing content to XML? How quickly can we do it? What are the overheads involved? Should we engage with an external vendor who can convert it for us in one shot? Or do we migrate it in one go? Or do we migrate it in phases? Last but not the least, what would be the cost of this activity? We'll try to give you a quick glance at what approach we followed, and that probably is where the crux of our presentation is going to be focused on. We audited a cross section of our documentation that we had authored. We identified the document types, the content, and the styles. Then we started building up an inventory of the styles and the paragraph styles, and then what would be the corresponding elements that each of these styles need to be mapped to in data. So the implementation partner that we engaged with build the scripts for conversion. Essentially, it's a Java-based workflow which uses Java code and XLT and some configuration files. Particularly for our interest, one of the configuration files was a mapping file. Just to give you a sample, the mapping file looks like this, what I've highlighted here on the screen. So it mapped each FrameMaker style to a data element. So the good part about this is that this is extendable. So going forward, if we encounter a new style in future, we just have to come here, update this inventory, run the migration process again. It will run seamlessly. It took us about 2 months plus to build this framework. We went through several iterations. We identified what are our doc types, and we ran this migration on each doc type, map styles. It was iterative to the core, but at the end, this migration workflow is available now in our AEM system, and any of our writers can run it on demand. Just to give you an idea about what we are talking about, a 400 or a 500 page FrameMaker document with pre and post cleanup can be converted in a matter of 2 to 4 hours. So the workflow-based migration is a great enabler for us. It speeds up the migration process and gives us complete control over the timelines and cost with minimal overhead. So our next sub-project was AEM and data customization. And a bulk of this was how do we plan to customize our plugins. So we use some of the learnings from the content audit that we did for the migration process. And we created the inventory of data elements, and that became an input for our customization. So we identified the data elements that we need to process in our document, and then we created mock-up templates. This is something that our team of technical writers work together. So we created a mock-up template based on the elements that we want to process, and that template became a kind of a requirement document for the implementation partners. But we also did in parallel, because we were looking at the content for migration very closely. We built a sample input file, because when we have the templates, we need to run that template against some input files and validate if our plugins are behaving the way we want them to behave. This sample data input file comprises of a data map and a host of topics which covered almost all the corner cases. And we picked up representational samples and try to identify problematic scenarios. To give an example, we have a lot of content in tables. So hyphenation, we figured out that hyphenation becomes an issue, especially because we deal with a lot of alarm names, and the hyphenation algorithms are not able to parse alarm names when we have digits and all cap characters, which is typical of an alarm name. We ran into issues with illustrations and the size and display. This was possible only because we had a huge chunk of representational data. It was like a test case that we were running our plugin against. And then we worked with our implementation partner, and we identified the fixes, or we discovered workarounds. a great learning experience for the team, because as we were testing these scenarios, the team skill level was also getting enriched. The other part that we wanted customized is taxonomy, because we are publishing. We wanted to drive over publishing with the help of taxonomy, metadata, or tags, as we call them in AEM. So we identified what is the metadata that we like to process, and where it will sit in AEM, and how it will get propagated to SharePoint, and how it will sit in SharePoint. So all that brainstorming was done in this thing, and here when we were doing this thing, so we ran all these tests with the dummy files. We didn't have to wait for our PDFs or HTMLs to come to a certain level of maturity. This activity we could start very early in the cycle. And the last piece of customizations that we had pertained to the web editor. Now, the current version of XML add-on has offers some cool features in the web editor, and we set up these configuration snippets, boilerplates, conditional tags, to name a few, and we also tweaked the web editor CSS to get what you see is what you get appearance when you're authoring content. In this phase, what we felt worked very well in our favor was we built an inventory of the data elements that we want to process. We had the mockup templates and the sample input file that help us speed up the implementation. It helped us to be in complete control of the implementation. This was the third and the last piece of this, the project that we ran. As we said earlier, this was the most important piece, because this is what our end customer would see. So if we do a great job in migration, and we do a great job in customization, and don't do a great job here, all the hard work is lost. So we understand. We understood that this was the proof of the pudding lied in this piece of implementation. So in fact, we got started with this piece of engagement on day one of our project. So here, the first part that we looked at, we built UI prototypes, because this was something that would happen in SharePoint. We just needed to be aware of what to push from AEM and how it would be absorbed in. So we created UI prototypes. So we had the services of a UX UI consultant for a few weeks. We had the wireframes done for SharePoint, essentially that comprised of landing pages, product pages, and navigation. And we were constantly identifying the hooks in both the systems. So what we need to share from AEM and what we need to pick up in SharePoint. To give an example, now we had identified the taxonomy that we'll be using. Now we needed to set it up in AEM. So what we did is we used the out-of-the-box AEM tags. So we added metadata for products, release, doc types, title, publish date, doc info, to name a few. And then to map it our taxonomy is driven at a bookmap level. So we tweaked the properties page so that we could add this extra taxonomy at the bookmap level. So once these two were in place, so we configured the REST interface to in AEM to talk to SharePoint. So this was done via SharePoint service configuration. The team built workflows for publishing content and metadata. And this is the asset level metadata that goes along. So when we run a workflow, the workflow pushes the PDF and HTML, and also pushes the metadata along with it. So this metadata that we pushed became instrumental in driving the queries on SharePoint. The workflow-based content publishing used the REST interface, and it made publishing fast and reliable. And leveraging the out-of-the-box AEM tags taxonomy and tailoring the workflows, our content is seamlessly getting pushed to SharePoint as of today. So once this content is pushed, the SharePoint team runs a query, and based on that, the metadata that we attack, so we have a framework. But what you see listed, this is an example of the customer portal. The tiles that you see based on the customer access. So it will show them the products for which they have access to. So that piece was done in SharePoint. So once the customer comes to the landing page, they click on the tile, the product tile where they want to access the documentation, and the next page becomes visible. Now both these pages, that one we see at the back, and these are generated dynamically using a query in SharePoint. And this was possible because we used the workflow to publish from in AEM, and then we leveraged heavily on the taxonomy. So the publishing activity is completely automated. We just check the book and run a workflow, and it goes and sits at the relevant place on the customer portal. That's all from me. Over to Ravi for the closing notes.
Hey, thanks, Chander. Okay, so before I summarize, I want to, what we covered in the previous slides, I would like to acknowledge the services rendered by our implementation partner, Accenture. They worked very closely with us to help us get to where we are today. Some of the folks who worked with us from Accenture are on the call, and we would like to thank them for their help. In conclusion, we would like to say that it is indeed possible with careful planning, a clear understanding of the goals. Any team can get to, any team, irrespective of whether it is big or small, can hop into the data bandwagon and reap the benefits it provides. With workflows that define migration and having provisions that enable self-paced migration, the teams themselves can be in control of AEM implementation. By utilizing the out-of-the-box features that the tool provides and leveraging on taxonomies, metadata, and also by utilizing the AEM APIs, the REST API that Chander was speaking about earlier that helps us connect to SharePoint seamlessly, any team could take the leap forward and be on board data. We are convinced that any documentation team, any organization, I'm just restating, irrespective of size, can move from legacy authoring to the new world data authoring. Thank you very much.
Great job, guys.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Excellent.
Okay, maybe you can leave the screen share on for a while we do the Q&A.
Okay, I'll turn it on. Sorry.
We have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and there were a lot of really positive comments in the chat as well, by the way, guys. Do you want to pick the first question, Matt?
Well, the easy one is the question about recording of the sessions, which of course are all recorded, and you'll all have access to them. That will be perpetual, but that'll just lead us off into the rest of the questions. A few people were wondering, along with commenting how well everything was organized, wondering some of your partners, some of the players involved in the different projects you were doing. For instance, who was it that helped you out with the the conversion of your legacy data and setting up some of those conversions, XSLTs, et cetera.
Yeah, that's the implementation partner we had. They were primarily responsible for implementing that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was outsourced. It was not in-house.
Got it. Okay. So, Stefan, any other questions in there?
Yep. So there's who was the implementation partner who created the Java XSLT mapping file for the content?
A few people were looking for a name there, that's all.
We had answered that in the summary slide, and also answered this query.
Now, to more broadly answer that question, there are a number of excellent organizations that can help you with that, and Stefan and I are happy to help you out with that. I've helped out with that. I know Bernard has helped out with that. We've got a number of the Adobe resources that have been presenting here today. If you want to reach out to the TechCom team, to me, or to any of those presenters who have been facilitating these sessions, we've got Publishing Smarter, myself, TechCom Tools, we've got Mekon, and all are really well qualified to help you out. And you just have to find the team that's the good fit for your organization.
Right. And of course, we have partners like Accenture and Capgemini who can also help you out with that. And sometimes these guys even work together. We have a question from Mavenir from Anuradha Kupasani. Hi, Anuradha. I think you have been here yesterday as well, right? Happy to have you here again. We have a SharePoint site where we upload our guides and the customers access the guides from there. If your docs are still in SharePoint, how do you publish from AEM to SharePoint? That was already answered by Ravishankar in the Q&A pod itself. Okay. Just put that in, answer just in. The legacy files are on SharePoint, and so are the converted HTML files are pushed to SharePoint from AEM. Okay, good. Fine. We still have about 15 minutes to go until we start with the next presentation. So if you have some more questions, feel free to put them in the chat or grab a coffee or
Stefan, I had a question for the guys here. So with such a well laid out presentation, there was a comment that your presentation was as well structured as a DITA topic or a DITA map. And
Thank you.
Given the organization that you guys had and the success that you had, what was perhaps the thing that you would change, if anything, with the project that you took, whether it was scope, time frame, bringing people in, keeping more things internal? What if you were to do the entire project again? How would it differ, knowing what you know now?
What I would say is that the most ideal scenario is that we implemented sites. We were extremely lucky because our SharePoint developers were really skilled, and they got the job done in a matter of what we did as a team with the implementation partner. We arrived at a design and worked in the what are the kind of queries they would write. We was very skeptical till the time we saw a proof of concept that it was implementable in SharePoint, because when we are talking about two systems, now if you go for sites, everything we know what sites is capable of, but when the data goes from AEM to SharePoint, we started getting jittery, and it was thanks to our SharePoint team's expertise who could tie it together. In an ideal world, AEM XML add-on with sites would be the best proposition.
Yeah, the charter given to us was that our customers are so very familiar with the SharePoint interface that they didn't want to move from that kind of a model, and we did not have the resources at that point in time when we were talking about this earlier last year to explore any other option other than SharePoint. So as Chander was saying, everything had to be accommodated within the existing framework. And thanks to the SharePoint team and the implementers, we had to work very closely to to make it happen, and that too within a very short time period. So if you ask me what would have changed is, so given the scope and the timelines and in the limitations that we had, we could crunch and do an excellent job, and we could meet the customer demands, because there was this October deadline that was looming large over us, and we had to meet that. So that was the SharePoint team did a great job.
Excellent.
There's a question from LG. What was the difficult part in this migration work? Is it conversion of data to XML or using data XML?
I would say it is converting data into XML because again here our implementation partner had a vision how they wanted to do it, because as Stefan you would know, AEM also has the capability of with FMPS it can convert FrameMaker files for you to data. But what we felt is that there is a significant overhead, and it would take a few days to convert a 500-page guide because there was a significant amount of cleanup. But now the setup that we have, we can churn a 500-page guide, and we could start authoring and publishing it from AEM in a matter of 4 hours. So that was the most complex piece of the implementation.
Okay. And a question related to that, also from LG, how was the legacy conversion to XML controlled without data loss? Was it also taken care of by data XML?
Yes. So what the workflow does, Stefan, is that we have a pre-cleanup exercise that we run. So we normalize the FrameMaker document, but when we run our workflow within AEM, so it prints out the log. So wherever it's not able to meet any text that it cannot handle, it will print it to the log and give a reason. So that's the time we would start debugging. The log would help us debug that. There were some guides. Yeah, most of the guides would go through very clean, but if FrameMaker allows writers to deviate from standards, if people would deviate from standards, all those rogue cases would get logged on to the log. We would debug the log and see where are the deviations, either normalize it or map it using the mapper configuration mapper that we have.
Yeah. Okay. And while I, of course, need to mention Sarah O'Keefe and Scriptorium as a partner, a potential partner as well. Hello, Sarah. I also take the next question, or maybe you want to take that one, Matt. There's one unanswered question in the Q&A.
Oh, as far as teeing up our next crew. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay, then I will take that. From Kathleen Temple, she's asking, did you use a taxonomy management tool to keep track of the tags, TAGS tags for this project?
Yeah, so our taxonomy is still in a primitive state. So as I said, the taxonomy right now we are looking at, because we're moving from a world where we were looking at bundles, zip files, or this thing. So we started with a minimal taxonomy. So we're essentially interested in the product release number, the doc type, and a couple of other fields. So all that is getting managed manually. We are not integrating with a taxonomy management tool right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.